earlier this week based on Daniel Ricciardo's lap in the Red Bull, apparently at Silverstone. He really impressed, showed that he still has a bunch of promise in this sport. Kind of walk me through, Nate, just how things unfolded. A call was made that basically was the nail in the coffin for Nyck de Vries.
Yeah, it was. It all seems like that part of it all seems to have happened quite quickly. But I think this was kind of death by a thousand cuts for Nyck de Vries. I think this was coming for about a week. If you kind of look at what Marco said, I mean, we've talked about it, haven't we, over and over again. He wasn't exactly Nyck de Vries' biggest fan, which is ironic because he's the guy that basically signed Nyck de Vries off the basis of one very good performance in Italy last year. It seems that originally de Vries was told he had until Zandvoort, his home race, which is, the race after the summer break. That very quickly changed to Austria and Britain. And I think as soon as Ricciardo became aware of that and aware of the fact that de Vries was most likely on his way out, I think it coincided perfectly for Ricciardo with the fact that he'd been preparing for this Silverstone test. I've been told by him, by people close to him, he was treating that test as an audition really for a bigger role within the team, a race seat. At the same time, he's starting to think, I do kind of miss driving. I miss racing. He's at all these races. He's doing a lot of media commitments. And I think that, if you're doing that and you're as competitive as these Formula One drivers are, it must have been pretty painful to be sat there watching this. You're in the team kit. You kind of, after a while, start to feel like, well, I'm just here doing all this media stuff. I'm not really racing. I think that started to grate on him a little bit. And it coincided with this opportunity being there for AlphaTauri. And I think the big thing was that it was very, very clear to Ricciardo that this could be it. This could be the one foot in the door moment you're going to get. If you turn this down now, and Liam Lawson, who's one of the only Red Bull Junior drivers left outside of F1, if he comes in, does a good job, I think Red Bull would look at that and say, well, this guy's doing well. You've already turned down the opportunity once. Why do we give it to you again? So I think by Sunday of Silverstone, I spoke to him on Saturday. I just saw him very briefly and had a quick chat. I think by then he kind of knew. I think looking back at the conversation I had with him, it was quite brief, but I think he said one or two things that I should have followed up with, like, well, there is going to be a seat free by the sounds of it. Yeah, there is a seat coming free, Daniel. He said, like, I am missing the racing, I'm missing the driving. My follow-up should have been, well, I mean, wait around. There's probably going to be a seat free, just over there at that team very, very soon. And then I think that from everything you hear, Monday, I think Ricciardo was calling people, asking them about the AlphaTauri setup, what to expect there. And then Tuesday, the one thing Christian Horner wanted to see is this guy, is this the Ricciardo of a few years ago, or have we kind of got ourselves into a situation where he's still not quite the Ricciardo of old? And from everything we've heard, straight into the car, was immediately quick. I think there was a spin later in the day, but I think he was, he had enough credit in the bank by that point to say, oh, it's just one spin. And I think for Horner, by that point, he called Helmut and said, this is legit, let's go for it. And obviously they don't just make that call out of nowhere. The contracts were already starting to be written up. They'd already had the conversations. And then Nyck de Vries gets a very, very blunt phone call, I think, from Helmut Marko saying, thank you, but, we're going to move on from you. And then, all hell broke loose because, the Dutch journalists found out. We started to see, reports leaking through from very credible Dutch journalists. And then before we knew it, there's a press release coming at 3 p.m. Get ready. Danny Ric's in for the season. So really changed very, very quickly. And I think that a lot of things kind of all happen at the same time. I'm very interested to see over the next few weeks how Ricciardo is. I think he's going to be very, very happy the first week or so. He's joining probably the team with the worst car right now in Formula One. And I think that one of the reasons he wanted to stay until 24, and again, we can talk more about this now, is that, and we've mentioned it on the pod before, but Red Bull really wants AlphaTauri to have a much closer relationship in 24 with Red Bull, take much more parts, be much more competitive, be a much more serious team, I think. And Ricciardo really liked the idea of having a preseason with that team and then racing with that team. So he's I think he's had to swallow a bit of that and say that this could be the only chance. He's going into a pretty dire situation. It's not going to be that competitive. And really the only measuring stick we're going to have from the outside is how he's competing against Tsunoda. Obviously, de Vries, I don't think de Vries did that badly against Tsunoda, but I think that he came in with that huge reputation from Monza last year and he just didn't live up to it. And I think it's difficult to live up to it when your car is barely able to make it out of Q1. So that's going to be really interesting to see, but an amazing news story for Formula One. A great story, I think, for everybody except Nyck de Vries, who it's difficult not to feel sorry for. He had 10 races and he's just kind of been cut loose. So yeah, fascinating to see how it played out and fascinating to see what we'll be saying about this move in 6 months, because there's about 6 different outcomes here. I was thinking about them all earlier. Like every way you slice it, there's a great outcome in terms of a story. And yeah, I'll let Laurence talk for a bit because I've just been waffling on. But yeah, I'm really excited about it for a number of reasons. And yeah, over to Laurence to continue the hype.
Nate, I just love how excited you are about this. I mean, it's clear that this is...
I had to remind myself I'm on a pod with two other people because it could have just been a long monologue about Danny Rick and Red Bull and how this all came to be.
Well, Nate was named the Ricciardo Whisperer by someone on Twitter, I believe. Was it Twitter or Reddit? Or
it was Twitter, yeah. Somebody said the only source I believe on Ricciardo is Nate, the Ricciardo Whisperer.
Good way to be.
I had to give credit. There's other journalists. I mean, there's been a few other people that that had that news at least bubbling, at the same time. So, but I'll take it. That's if you're going to be a whisperer for anyone, I think Danny Rick's a pretty good one.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.